Chapter 2, The Three Graces. The class was about to start. Rose was trying this BYOB painting in glass class that her coworker suggested to see if she could find some friends interested in the same stuff as her. There were too many couples, what annoyed Rose, but there were also some alone women that she could try to relate with. They seemed to be a bit older than her, but that was never a problem anyway. "How is the class going?" Sienna asked Rose through a text message. "It didn't start yet, but could be promising. Some loners like me in here." Rose answered her and got a smiling emoji back. Rose wasn't super excited, but it was okay. She still had the candle-making class, a dancing class, and 2 cat cafeterias to try yet. Making friends as an adult was even challenging than trying to date, but she knew that it was going to help a lot if she could. There was a table with 3 women, and Rose chose that one. Apparently they didn't know each other and were trying to make friends too, and that would be probably Rose's best bet for the night. The first one sitting at her right was Dakota. She was in her mid-30s as Rose, had colorful hair in tones of pastel blue and a very lovable smile. Rose noticed she smelled like incense and was wearing a pentagram ring, and that made her sympathize with Dakota immediately. She seemed to be skilled with the painting stuff, and Rose thought that maybe she was a teacher or a regular student there. At her left was Tina. She was very lovable and immediately started to introduce herself to Rose when she joined their table. Tina was from South Korea and was trying to make new friends in US. Very promising. Her husband was transferred there, he was always busy working, and she was spending so much time alone at home that it sounded like a good idea to try different activities and maybe make some friends. Rose hoped that they would have things in common since their objectives were the same. Sitting in front of her was Joyce. She was smiley and tall, had long braids until her waist, and liked to chat a lot. She was a middle-aged mom that married and had kids too soon in life, so now that her kids were on college, she found herself with a lot of free time to spend, and all the old dreams started to pop up, to maybe come true. Joyce started all the classes she could in art and singing, and was engaged with volunteering. The class started, and the teacher was, surprisingly, a handsome guy named James. He had an accent, maybe Italian, Rose thought, and he looked like a model. Joyce immediately made a comment about what all of them were thinking. "Wow, how can anyone pay attention to the class and not the teacher?" The girls laughed at her observation, and Dakota mentioned he was actually single. Rose smiled. She always enjoyed to flirt, but more for the sport than actually trying to get somewhere, and every time she felt there was an opportunity, her sassy side would come out to play. That was an aspect of her that was buried in a while, and Rose was missing it. After spending so long locked inside herself, she was trying to be more adventurous again and bring some life back. It was still a weak instinct, but it was there, even ignoring the messages of Johnny, the bartender, for the whole week. So Rose kept one eye in their conversation at the table and other in James, and retained her best posture and a soft smile so she could look naturally pretty from any angles. Joyce was making friends with everyone in the room, and James and her were interacting with each other enough for Rose to use the opportunity to exchange looks with him. And she felt he was interested. Rose was a beautiful woman. Not the classic standard type of beauty, but her own unique collection of traces that were harmonious and elegant and create the whole picture of a charming and lovely woman. She also knew how to value her own characteristics and natural beauty, and her posture and behavior complete the pack of, why is that guy interested in her after all? That happened all the time when she was younger. It was authenticity. Rose stopped bothering to fit into the standards when she was still a teenager and created her own style, so her presence was always naturally standing out from the majority. If she wanted to call attention, it wouldn't work as well as just being herself does. Rose concentrated on her glass, and for a second she forgot about James and the conversation the girls were having in their table. She decided to be bold and try to paint something inspired in the Monet gardens in her glass, while tasting the sparkling wine she brought to the class. Her art was her passion and was saving her from the pain during all that process she was going through. "I see we have a talent here," James whispered to her. She slowly stared at him and smiled, with no rush to answer. "It's what I do for living. I am an artist, so thankfully, I am good enough." Confidence. That was another pillar of her charm. Someone called James from the other side of the room. A lady wanted to show him what she was doing, making her young boyfriend obviously jealousy and uncomfortable. Poor kid, Rose thought, while concentrating to her glass. She was slightly annoyed with the interruption, but also she noticed that her shoulders were relaxing while James was walking away from her. The other girls at her table were concentrated too, and she served them with her sparkling wine to be nice and keep the contact. She was there for the new friends after all. James was looking at her frequently, and she was glimpsing at the corner of her eyes, but for some reason it wasn't fun anymore. Kinda started bothering her a little, as if she was already bored about it. But it wasn't just it felt like James wasn't interesting at all. Rose could recognize he was handsome and hot, and probably a cool guy if she could talk to him enough to know, but she didn't want to find out anymore. The sense of adventure was gone. That was sad. So she heard in her mind Alex's voice calling her. Her heartbeat raised, and she felt her body flooded with indescribable joy and pleasure, as if she had just eaten her favorite chocolate after a year of dieting, or as if she were swimming in the Caribbean Sea after a harsh winter in Chicago. "Hi, my love. I am here," she answered mentally. And that was all. Just a brief moment that Rose felt her connection with Alex, and she just lost it. Rose couldn't explain, but she believed that she was connected to Alex in a different plan, in some dynamic Rose didn't understand, but she was aware of. First, she could feel his presence during her meditations. She was just there, concentrated, and he would appear in front of her. She thought it was imagination, but her heart started to tingle nicely, and she could see some strings of light connecting her heart to his. Rose could touch the strings, but she only understood it was real because she couldn't reproduce it all the time, no matter how hard she tried. It was out of her power to make it happen, like if it depends of something external. After that, she started randomly feeling tingles in her forehead, accompanied of mental images of Alex kissing it. She always felt it on Wednesdays, especially in the afternoon. And sometimes it was different. She would hear him or feel his presence anytime or anywhere, but he wasn't there. Maybe the sights of him were also related, but Rose wasn't sure. And in real life, Alex refused to talk to her. No matter how hard Rose tried, he only gave her silence. So she didn't know if he was feeling it too. Most of the time, she chose to believe it was her imagination trying to give her some consolation and hope to live a happy life one day. James started walking back to their table, and she didn't want him there anymore. So Rose concentrated once more to her glass and pretended not to notice him. Joyce was more than happy to chat with James and anyone else willing to do so, hence Rose mentally thanked her for that and continued painting. Tina finished her glass very fast. She did some cute snowflakes falling and was willing to chat, and Rose engaged in a conversation with her about her life and husband. Lonely people tend to talk a lot about themselves because they don't feel heard, and Rose understands that very well. So she let Tina tell her about her children and how they were going in the new country, the new school, and all the details of her housewife routine. Rose noticed she was feeling enchanted by Tina's life in every little detail. Sounded so delightful to her to have a life where she could watch her babies to grow, and a man that loves you so much and return home to your arms every night. Rose felt emotional, but she wasn't going to cry in front of everyone. Anyway, she was going to need a moment in her car alone before driving home. When younger, Rose was focused in her career and she never wished to have family. However, when she met Alex, everything changed. She found herself so deeply in love that marrying him and having their children seemed to be the best and only way to go, making her confused and scared at the same time. She understood with therapy that she always wished for that life, but she pretended not to want it because Rose couldn't believe she would ever make it. Facing those fears and pain that came so young in her life when people convinced her she wasn't worthy of being loved was terrible and necessary for her to heal. So now she knew what her priorities were. On the other hand, when she understood that losing Alex condemned her to never fulfilling her dreams, since Rose couldn't stop loving him or to love anyone else, the dream became a fantasy and her life a nightmare, and every day she had to fight with her own brain to find the will of living again. While listening to Tina, Rose mentally blessed her and her family and hoped one day in this life or another, For the mercy of God, she could live that too. It was important to Rose during the Depression to deeply connect with spirituality, strengthening her faith and giving her hope to move on. It was Rose's daily struggle. Rose liked Tina, she was nice and smart, and was a practitioner of Buddhism, so they would exchange ideas and have some interesting discussions further. So she asked for Tina's phone number and suggested them to have coffee later that week. She knew an adorable place on the north side that had fresh and tasty pastries that Rose didn't find anywhere else in town. Rose then, finishing her flowers painting, started watching Dakota working on her glass. She covered most of the bottom part of her glass with colorful flowers and mandalas that were tangling with each other as if the whole draw were inside a whirlwind. It was fascinating. "Where did you learn to paint like that?" Rose asked her. "I didn't. I started painting to help me pour and express my emotions, which was my therapist's suggestion. And only later I decided that I wanted to learn something about art and maybe make them prettier. But that's just how it flows for me." Dakota answered, clearly proud of her glass. "That's amazing. That's funny because I work with art, but whenever I feel like expressing myself, I sing," Rose said, laughing. "Really? I wish I could sing. I am terrible." "I am terrible too. At least I think so. I just feel better doing. But it doesn't mean I can do it well," Rose answered, making Dakota laugh. "Well, I do sing." Joyce commented and sang a few notes of respect, making the girls and other people in the room to applause, impressed. "Thanks. I love singing. Me and my sisters are having karaoke night every second Saturday of the month. You girls are welcome to join," Joyce said. Rose got excited about it and accepted the invitation, using the opportunity to get the phone number of both Dakota and Joyce, feeling successful on her mission. The rest of the class was fine, everyone finished their glasses, and Joyce was so entertained talking to people that her glass had only a smiley in it and still was voted as the coolest painting from them all. By the end of the night, Rose was feeling happy and excited by making new friends and maybe having some fun from now on. It was too much drama for too long, and she was ready to experience new things. It was amazing how making new friends and just the perspective of living a different life, one that she truly enjoys, was making Rose feel remarkably better. On her way home, Sienna sent her a text message asking how it went, and Rose immediately called her to let her know about the girls she met and the near events she was going to gather in. She was brief because Sienna was going to bed, and she didn't want to disturb her and Paul, and noticed she was still aiming for talking to people in the end of the call. "Wow, Rose, you were really out of reach." She talked to herself out loud. Back home, it was silent, and her only company, Josie, was swimming peacefully in her aquarium. Her apartment had large windows with a view to the city. She would keep the lights off most of the time because Rose loved to watch the lights and life of Chicago at night. Sitting in her couch alone, sometimes with a glass of wine and some other with chamomile tea, she would imagine how exciting and fun were the adventures people were living out there. Probably stuff that could be on a book. And Rose felt herself apart from it, like life didn't belong to her, as it does to other people. How distant someone could be from living and still be alive. Rose questioned herself, in her perspective, for how she feels. Rose saw herself floating in existence, just there waiting for the moment when she could be reinserted into the world, back to life. A real life that can be lived and not just survived. Rose felt as if she was holding her breath for a very long time, and the timing to exhale wasn't there yet. So she was watching people breathing from her window. Somehow, it was satisfying to watch from a distance and appreciate every little moment that could possibly happen to her when she was alive again. Imagine all the possibilities of happiness that could be and already were for others than her. On the other hand, the fear of never being able to breathe again was sometimes paralyzing. In those moments, Rose prays. The spiritual growth she was experiencing was perhaps the only part of her life that was still moving forward, and it was helping Rose to find guidance. Since she met and then lost Alex so long ago, Rose started questioning everything around her. She found herself completely out of path and far from who she is and wants to be. So even being hard to be standing still in her own story like that, it was better than keep running to the wrong direction as she was doing before. The hardest part was to imagine Alex living outside without her. The intrusive thoughts sometimes just fill her mind. Alex living and loving out there, while Rose was still in her cave, and it was devastating. It could be so painful that even the minimal image or glimpse of thought surrounding it had to be immediately purged. That's why she never dared to look for him in the social media, because Rose couldn't bear finding out.